Imagine a game which takes all the tropes of generic high fantasy completely seriously. Dragons, fairies, peasants, noble knights, and the very idea of a great quest. Tropes which we have all taken completely for granted and decided to take them seriously. A game which says, no, there is nothing generic about these things. Each one of them came from a rich culture influenced by the beliefs and values of people facing challenges unique to them and their era. This game is Pendragon. Pendragon, if it will stay upright, is a game which asks you, nay, challenges you to become immersed not only in the beliefs of your character, but to consider their material reality. A game in which the mythic nature of the world you are playing in is grounded by the hierarchical, cultural, and material barriers which many of us face in our real lives today. In Pendragon, you will be playing knights, the lowest rung of the very top of the feudal hierarchy, roughly between the years of 460 AD to 600 AD. This covers the rise of Uther as he attempted to hold back the Saxon conquests of the Isle, the Great Anarchy after his death, and the emergence of the once and future king, Arthur Pendragon, when he draws the sword from the stone and unites the Britons. This is the period of Camelot's rise and eventual fall, due to the rot festering at the heart of the perfect kingdom. This was a time when magic and dragons still roamed the Isle. Now, what does it actually mean to play a knight? Well, it means you'll be playing a character with influence and power over 95% of the population from session 1. Yet you will also have intense responsibilities and obligations to people who have that same level of power over you. You'll be playing someone driven by deeply held passions, yet who is intensely concerned about all of their relationships to everyone around them. And most of all, you'll be playing someone driven to seek glory, either in a grand estate that will be left to their children and heir, or in battle against numerous foes, against unassailable odds. What sort of knight will you be? Now, hang on a minute. Did I just say that you'll be playing over a period of like 140 years? How does that work? Well, dear viewer, I'm glad you asked. When I say you're playing a character who is deeply concerned about their relationships with everyone around them, I mean it. That's not just with your lords and your other player characters, the peasantry. It's also with your family. Your character will have a family before too long. You will probably get married after a couple sessions and have children shortly after that. Why does this matter though? Well, it's sort of the coolest part about Pendragon. Your next character is going to be your current character's child, your heir. You're going to watch them grow. You're going to play through their whole backstory as the parents shaping them, and then do the same and the same again. You are going to be a knight who served in Uther's court, someone who rode with him against the Saxons when they were first conquering the Isle. And then you'll be playing that character's heir, someone who was raised likely through the Anarchy, a period of deep civil unrest when nothing was safe. Bandits and barons and brigands, ruled the land. Someone who knew war from a young age, and they will see how Arthur changed that, brought peace and prosperity to the land. And then, as that knight grows in power, possibly even attaining a seat on the round table, well, we're going to see how the rot sets in, how the corruption at the heart of the perfect kingdom begins to fester. What will your character do in that? And the character that's deciding that's making those decisions, has a 3-generation backstory. Well, I know what my grandfather would have done deep in the Anarchy, or under Uther's reign. How would they have shaped that? What decisions did they make that shape your character now? Why is this so cool? Well, it exactly puts you in the mindset of a medieval knight, someone who is deeply concerned with leaving a legacy and a great estate for your next character or their children to inherit. Someone who is deeply concerned with being glorious, not only just because it's cool, because it's fun, because you want to go out and do cool things, but because your next player character will inherit a portion of their father's glory. That's awesome. It ties the act of creating this backstory into the very fabric of the game. But also, it sort of begs the question, right? What sort of legacy do you want to leave for your heir? Were you one of King Uther's greatest allies, or one of the last holdouts resisting his calls to war? Did you trust the enigmatic Merlin, or chase off the old fool? And the young Arthur, barely a man, when he drew the sword from the stone, did you kneel? Did you pledge allegiance immediately to the once and future king? Or did you resist? He was but a boy, untested, and his father was a poor king. You will likely follow in his footsteps. That's what makes Pendragon so great. It gives you the chance to leave your mark on a real history, a history that you're going to get to play through. Okay, so hopefully if you're still here, I have piqued your interest. Hi, my name is Declan and I love Pendragon. I think it is one of the greatest games ever made, and I am only slightly exaggerating when I say that. Have I played the game? Yes, I have played three different short campaigns of it now. Roughly 30 to 40 sessions all up of play. Not yet the full Great Pendragon campaign. It's on the bucket list. I'm sort of waiting for the new editions version to come out. But I love this game and just want to share that with you and anyone else who is interested. Now, what are we doing here? Well, I've broken this review up in several sections, as you can sort of see below. The first section is what we've just covered. It's designed to sort of pique your interest. If you're really interested in playing Pendragon, I want you to be able to send this video to your prospective players. Say, don't worry about the fact that it's 30 or 40 or however many minutes long this ends up being. Just watch the first 5 or so minutes. That will give you a good rundown of what to expect from this game. And hopefully it'll sell the game for your players a little bit, so you don't have to worry about doing that and learning possibly a whole new game system. Then we're going to get to the next section. Sections where I'm going to go into a bit more depth about the different systems, how you play Pendragon, what sort of game it produces, and some of the most unique tools it will give you to play the game. After that, we're going to discuss a bit more of like the Great Pendragon campaign and some of the issues I sort of have with it, and how I sort of think it's maybe the weakest part of the Pendragon line. We'll get to it. Then I think it's sort of important that we address some of the misgivings that people may have about playing a Pendragon or playing characters set in this sort of time and culture and space, as well as my personal fixes for this so that anyone can play at your table and enjoy this amazing game. And lastly, I'm going to give you a good direction on where to start with Pendragon. If I've sold it well and you're interested and want to jump in, I'll tell you exactly what to buy, what to get, and how to maybe start your first campaign, what you might want to do in your first few sessions. Okay, so if you're going to get into Pendragon today, I assume you're probably going to start with something that looks like this. These are the two main core rulebooks that are out at the moment. The core rulebook is more of a player's handbook. It's mostly got all the rules for creating player knights and the basic phases of the play, all the general rules. And then the Game Master's Handbook, which has a lot more good advice and tools for running the game, setting up a campaign, all those sorts of things. So for the sake of complete transparency, I actually don't have that much experience with this edition of the game. It was my last campaign. I ran mostly using this stuff. It was 10 sessions of those 40 sessions I've played. I actually have the most experience with the previous edition, which was Pendragon 5.2. Just a lot of fun, and you can still find the PDFs online and play it if you'd like. It's brilliant. But the main thing to take away is the differences between Pendragon 5th edition and Pendragon 6th edition are minor. Just a few small rules cleanups, some clarifications, some different advice. What these books really are is their cleanest and clearest edition of the game. Everything is included in these books and a third book, which will hopefully be coming out soon. And with them, you'll have everything you need to run Pendragon. Now, enough about these gorgeous books. Let's talk about what's actually in them. Pendragon is a D20 roll under game. But hey, whoa, don't leave yet. It's not that sort of D20 game. It's a D20 roll under game. Now, this is often a little bit confusing for new players, but the best way to describe it is that the Pendragon D20 roll under system, it's like blackjack with a variable target number. So let's take the humble awareness skill. Let's imagine a player knight with an 13 awareness skill looking for bandits on the road. Okay, that 13 is your target number. It's the 21 in the blackjack analogy. So when you want to make your awareness test, the character would roll their D20 and you're hoping to get a 13 or under. If you get a 14 up, if you go over 13, you bust. You've failed the check. If you get under 13, you've succeeded the check. Doesn't matter where in there you got, you've succeeded. If you get exactly equal to the 13, that's your crit. That's your blackjack. Okay, so if you think about it, it's actually quite simple. There's very little math involved. You'll sometimes get some modifiers to the skills. Maybe you're standing up on your horse and you've got full light ahead of you. So maybe you have a +5 to your roll. Maybe you have to roll under the 18 instead of a 13. But otherwise, it's a very simple and quick and intuitive game. One little note about skills and modifiers, though, is that the 20 is actually the worst result you can get. It's a fumble, unless your skill is 20 or higher. If your skill is 20, then it works just the same as everything else, except you can't fail anymore. And if you roll a 20, it's a crit. You've done the best you possibly can. But if your skill is over 20, either because you're extremely skilled or maybe you're driven by some passions, then it actually increases the chance for you to critically hit. So in this edition of the game, this is a little different from the previous editions. It's one of the cleaned up things that I sort of like in this new edition is if you have a skill that's over 20, the way you describe that is 20 plus whatever you are over it. So if you imagine if you would have a skill of something like, should be 23, you would write that as 20 plus 3. What does that plus 3 mean? Well, it means you add 3 onto your roll. Well, we want to roll low. What's the benefit of that? Well, any roll that equals or exceeds 20 counts as a critical hit. So if we imagine that skill of 23, well, that means that you actually crit on a 17, 18, 19, or 20. You crit 20% of the time. It is a 20% of the time. So, yeah, 20%. That's actually the entire core resolution system of Pendragon sort of summed up in a nutshell. But I said this is the greatest game of all time. If you want a D20 roll under, you can easily just go play, Symbaroum or Dragon's Bane, and you can be a duck person in Dragon Bane. Like, what does Pendragon have on that? Well, that's the genius of Pendragon. It takes this very efficient engine and frame, slim, not too much weight on the chassis, and then builds systems of interconnected procedures and elements that creates a seamless gameplay experience, which models the stories of Arthurian literature. So let's start with the player character, what Pendragon calls the player knight, because everyone is playing a knight. Won't that make us all the same though? Like everyone playing fighters in D&D? Oh, sweet summer child. No, Pendragon cares really deeply about who your character is, and this is exemplified by the character's traits and passions. Traits are a series of 26 personality descriptors, which are each paired with their opposite trait. For instance, chaste is paired with lustful, and valorous is opposed by cowardly. These traits have values like skills, but each of these trait pairs must always equal 20 if added together. This means you could have 2 traits of 10, meaning that your character could go really either way on these. These are not defining traits for them. But if your character, say, has a 16 and a 4, for instance, a 16 in valorous and a 4 in cowardly, they are someone that is extremely valorous, that will almost always act valorously. But why are traits presented as skills? Well, because they actually impact what you can do and not do in the game. If you want to act valorously and you have a low valor, you might not be able to act valorously. Your character might run away. If your character is particularly lustful, and the Lord's beautiful wife has entered the feast and she's open dance, is your character gonna flirt? Well, you might not want to. You might really like the Earl and want to win his favor. But your character's extremely lustful. The GM's probably gonna ask you to roll the dice. You're gonna roll, more than likely, you're gonna get under your lustful value, and then your character's gonna act lustful. They, for the first few rounds of the feast, are probably gonna go flirt with the Lord's wife. Now, I hear a lot of people, when I first explained this, react in one of two ways. They either think it's the coolest thing they've ever heard, or they think it's horrible. They think that is a terrible idea. They wanted to play their character exactly how they want to play them. I want to push back on that a little bit. Pendragon is not a game that constrains role-playing. It's a game that honors it. You have made decisions in character creation and in play, which have meant that you have a knight with these high traits. For instance, you maybe put some extra points into your valor. You want to be known as a valorous knight, and you intend to act valorously. That's a good match then, okay? But there are maybe going to be times in a certain battle when it turns against you, and you're actually going to want to run. You're like, okay, I think my character's probably going to die here. This is an extremely dangerous battle. We've routed on 2 fronts. My knight is the only one holding this field. I want to go. And the GM's going to say, that sounds cowardly. That is not glorious. And they're going to probably ask you to roll your traits, roll them opposed, see which one wins that little contest. And if your valor wins, your character is not fleeing the field. They will fight and die to buy the retreating forces that little bit more time. How I like to think of it is that Pendragon is a game that takes your role-playing choices seriously. You said you wanted to play a valorous character. They are going to make sure you do. Your character can sort of turn around to you and say, no, this is who you've made me. I'm going to act this way. I'm a valorous knight, regardless of what you 21st century person think. I am a knight, okay? And I'm going to serve my lord. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. I would also sort of suggest that you give it a go anyway. If you're still not that interested, it still sounds a little bit weird, give it a go. Many people just like to be an actor. They want to embody their character. Well, actors, if something's happened with the script, they need to rewrite the lines, they need to change what this character's motivations are, an actor sort of has to roll with that. Consider that the fun part of this game, that you have to role play things, curveballs, things that you wouldn't have ever expected to do, that you wouldn't normally have done. And it is some of the most fun you can have. Passions are actually very similar to traits. They have a number between usually 1 and 20, in the same way that skills do. Passions of 16 and higher are famous. They're things that your character is known for, but they aren't paired against anything else. Then there's no opposing passion for each passion you have. Passions would be things like your loyalty to your Lord, your love of family, your devotion to God. These are the things that drive your character. The cool thing about passions, though they, in the same way, can constrain your role-playing choices, change what your character is going to do, they can also be the source of the most broken-ass powers in the entire game. So what do I mean by that? Well, it's not powers like the D&D sense of like, feats and spells and those sort of things, but I've already explained to you the core die resolution. D20 roll under, okay? That means most skills are going to be ranked between 8 and 20, okay? If you call on a passion, if you are acting in alignment with your passions, you can gain a bonus to whatever you're doing. You're fighting on the battlefield again, outnumbered against foes. You are suffering these penalties, you're getting hit and wounded, but no, you are fighting to defend your Lord. I call on my passion, I roll my dice, I've succeeded. You gain a massive bonus to your skills for the rest of the battle. That's how you prove to everyone around you that you care for your king. This is the way that you become a superhero in the game. This is the way that you do those outlandish things that we hear about in Arthurian myths. Let's paint the scene. Imagine that you are a knight on the battlefield. The lines are breaking. Your lord bestride his steed is struck down. He falls from his horse, surrounded by Saxon foes. You have a loyalty to your lord of 16. That's a famous trait. Your GM is going to ask you to call on your passion. You're going to go to your king. But it's 16 or higher for a reason. You want to do that. You want to stand with your king. You run up anyway. You know that you're probably going to be outnumbered. You're probably going to be in incredible danger. Well, this is where the passion comes in. It's your lifeline. You call on your passion. You call on that strength, your loyalty to your Lord. You roll the dice, you succeed, and you get a bonus against all these knights around you, against all those enemy Saxons. You stand and you defend your Lord with superhuman vigor, prowess, and skill. That's what passions let you do. Mechanically, whenever you want to do something that's very much in line with the passion, you can call on it. You roll a d20. If you get equal to or under it, if you succeed the passion roll, you get a +5 bonus to your skill. Now, we've just talked about the d20 roll under system. It's on a d20. It's a 1 to 20 chance. Most of your skills are going to be between 8 and 18. A +5 is a massive bonus. And if you crit that roll, it's a +10. That's huge. You can get into the area where you're critting on almost every one of your attacks. If your skills are high enough and you're passionate and you're invigorated by the passions, you can be an absolute meat grinder on the battlefield. And I've seen that countless times. It's some of the coolest parts of Pendragon is seeing your knight who's on the edge of defeat, just cutting their way through their enemies, just earning glory across the battlefield. That is some of the coolest parts of Pendragon. The passions don't have to just be used in battle. Another situation could be that you've fallen in love with a lady. You have a passion, a love for her, and you are trying to court her. And you've been that cool knight. You've been that cool warrior with your sword skill is 20 + 1, and you've got no dancing skill, and she wants to dance at a feast. Well, you can call on your love of that lady, or maybe your loyalty to your lord. You don't want to embarrass your lord, at this feast. Gain that bonus, gain that little benefit to your dancing skill. Hopefully you can make it over the line. Passions are some of the most fun parts of Pendragon. They constrain and change how you roleplay. They change the whole shape of the game. And it's honestly my favorite part of the game. So we have systems for modeling the richly complex inner life of your character in a way that reinforces player choice. But how do the player characters, the player knights, grow over time? How do they get better at things or change their mind? Well, it's very simple actually. Each of those things that we've mentioned before, skills, traits, and passions, all will have a little checkbox next to them. Throughout play, either when you fail things or succeed, or whenever your GM says so, put a little tick box next to that skill. When we get to the winter phase of the game, sort of the end of the year, you're going to get a roll and experience test for each one of those ticked skills, traits, or passions. If your roll is a failure, if you busted in the blackjack analogy, if you roll over your score, the score goes up by 1. This, I think, is absolutely brilliant. What it means in play is that when your skills are lower, you're going to get skill advances very quickly, very easily. In just a few years, you're going to go from a relative novice with, let's say, dancing, or the sword is probably more likely, to a skilled and notable swordsman. Someone who's not going to get as many advances anymore. It's going to be harder to level up your skill once it's at that 18 or 19 range. Now, as simple, intuitive, and fun as skill advances are, they're not the only method of advancement, and arguably it isn't even the most important one. All knights seek glory, and your knight is no different. Glory determines who's going to act first in a scene, can determine your seating in a feast, and determines who gets honors on the battlefield. Whenever you act gloriously, fighting in a famous battle, winning a tournament, winning a fair maiden's hand in marriage, you will earn some amount of glory. This is not like experience, though. Some people might think that way, oh, is glory just how we level up? But it's not quite that. It's more diegetic. It's a currency that, though we mechanize it, exists in the world. Now, why does glory matter? Well, number one, it's the only way for you to sort of increase your attributes. Every glory threshold that you reach, every 1,000 glory, you earn a prestige point. A prestige point can be spent to improve any attribute by 1, any passion by 1, any trait by 1, any skill by 1. If you've got a sort of 21, you wanted to get it to 22 without having to, roll a 20 on that experience test, this is the way to do it. If you want to get your strength to 16 because it'll make your damage go up, this is the only way to do it. But that's not the only thing that prestige points can be spent on. If you're married, if you have a partner, or possibly even if you don't, you can spend a prestige point to ensure that you have a healthy heir. This is all a bit abstract though. Let me try and ground it in an example from one of my campaigns. Early on in my first campaign, one of my player knights, Dame Aedwin, was called to fight the Saxon menace by her Earl and the King. The battle at first went well. Successful valorous and charge rolls meant that she spent the first few rounds of battle breaking the Saxon flank without getting hurt herself. The battle turned though, and the Earl was caught off guard and surrounded by housecarls, some of the deadliest warriors the Saxons have at their command. The situation looked dire. The Earl was likely to die in the next few rounds if Dame Aedwin didn't act fast. Well, Dame Aedwin's loyalty passion for the Earl was 16, famous, as were both her valorous and energetic traits. Without a second thought, she led a charge straight into the heart of the enemy forces to save the Earl. They were outnumbered, and so Aedwin called on her loyalty to her lord, giving her and her allies just enough of an edge to beat back the Saxon offensive and save the Earl. Several of her allies died, yet the Earl remained. For her bravery, she earned checks in her loyalty passion, her valorous, her energetic traits, as well as several checks in her combat skills. Not only that, she was awarded a massive amount of glory. She did something extremely dangerous, foolhardy even, but so knightly. Now, those rewards are one thing. The glory and the checks to her skills and passions are obviously helpful, but the Earl now also owed his life to this young knight. What would you do if you had, this powerful figure in your campaign indebted to you? You tell me. Now, I love that story, but we have tons more like that because that is the game that Pendragon produces. These systems work together to create those scenes, those events, those life or death moments when we are all on the edge of our seat. There's no fudging. I can't fudge anything. When we roll the dice, it's out in the open. We know exactly if she failed or succeeded her checks. We know exactly where those bonuses come from. And it makes it feel so much more real and visceral. And we feel exuberant when these amazing outcomes happen. But that isn't the only sort of story that you can tell in Pendragon. And your performance in these scenes has even more impact in the other major pillar of this game, the social pillar, the feasts. Okay, so what are feasts? Well, feasts provide a setting where failing to make the right argument can have just as much of an impact on the course of the campaign as any swing of the blade. And Pendragon provides a richly detailed procedure for running feasts, which you could easily port into any other game system. Feasts provide a way for you to not just get to know your peers and your betters, but to develop your reputation as a knight, and provide great opportunity for finding a spouse. I personally prefer to run one big feast at the beginning of each in-game year. This gives a great opportunity for rumors of upcoming events to circulate and set the tone for the years to come. This also provides the players a relatively consequence-free space to really try and push the envelope and get them into a bit of trouble, which is always fun. Often feasts end up being the most enjoyable and fun part of any Pendragon campaign. Take this story with Dame Aedwin in a feast after that battle in which she saved the Earl. This was one of the few feasts hosted by the king himself. And just after he had finished delivering a toast to Aedwin for saving the Earl, she was overcome with shaking fits and ravings to herself. This was the result of Fey meddling, but in her ravings, she kept muttering about a dragon waking and mailed boots landing on cold shores. When she woke in the infirmary, both her Earl and the king himself were called. Bleary-eyed and barely understanding what had happened, she had to defend herself from accusations of magic and witchcraft from her Earl and the King. Well, Adwin was a very combat-focused character. She didn't have many of those oratory skills, those intrigue skills in very high numbers. And so when she couldn't come up with a good enough argument to save herself, to avoid suspicion, well, the accusations somewhat stuck. This resulted in Adwin permanently losing points of honor and standing amongst her peers, as the accusations of witchcraft could not be easily shaken. Look, we've talked a lot about the mechanical systems of Pendragon and how they create these memorable and fun games, but how exactly do you run a game over the course of 140 years? When I play D&D, I can barely get through a 4-round combat in less than 2 hours. Well, on page 31 of the Game Master's Handbook, we see this fantastic scaffold on how to structure your campaign, your sessions, and Pendragon as a whole. Now, I hope that Chaosium is okay with me showing this image on screen. I think it is one of the most brilliant parts of the game, and it needs to be sort of pointed out, because this is the blueprint. This is the master plan. This is exactly how you run a Pendragon campaign. Now, I didn't have this table when I first started, but what I did have was the absolutely brilliant Pendragon actual play from Eric Vulgaris, who played through the entire great Pendragon campaign with 2 players, all up on YouTube. I highly recommend you check it out. I think it was maybe 200 episodes, and they go through everything from Uther to Arthur to the very fall of Camelot. It is such an amazing actual play. It deserves 1,000 times more recognition and viewership and acclaim than it has. It is so much fun. One thing for the Eric Vulgaris Pendragon actual play, links are in the description. But if you don't want to start at the very beginning, I recommend you start at the Age of Uther recap. That's also linked in the description. The Age of Uther recap is basically, they've gone through the entire Age of Uther and where they're just about on the cusp of the anarchy. They give a full recap of everything that's come before, and you can jump straight in from there. It's a lot of fun. That's, I think, where I did start. I've gone back and watched everything, and I do recommend you do that. But if you want to start where they know the game, they don't know as much, they're really in the midst of the game. They have lots of different characters, relationships, goals. I recommend you start there. Now, back to the video. Eric breaks his game down into 4 sections, roughly corresponding to the seasons. The start of the year is the spring, and it's usually opened with the Easter feast, and then maybe 1 or 2 little side activities the players might want to go on. Maybe going hunting with a noble neighbor that they want to grow their relationship with, or maybe seeking out some advice from their lord, or even from Merlin, if that's how you want to play the game. Then comes summer. This is the time for campaign, raiding, and questing. If you are going to be called to war, it will be in summer. If you're strapped for cash, this is the time when you should go raiding. And if the king issues a great quest, typically it is during summer. Then we have autumn, which is a time for solo events, times for each of the player knight to tend to their estates or go and attend to personal business, things that have cropped up through the year that they want to sort out here and now. Autumn is also my personal preference, and I think also the way Eric runs his game, the perfect time to do a few more little family scenes. How is your wife doing attending to the estates? What issues is she facing? Your son or your daughter, your heir, is getting into hijinks, getting into trouble. What sort of discipline are you going to give them? What sort of values are you going to instill in them? That'll probably influence what traits they, start with. I definitely recommend you take your time on these sorts of scenes. They're some of the most fun and the most characterful parts of Pendragon, and the parts of the game that really make it feel alive, feel visceral, feel important. And it means that when your character gets into those life and death situations on the battlefield, they're fighting for something that you also care about. I know actually that in my most recent Pendragon campaign, the first significant death we had, that player said that it was the most hurt or saddened they've been by character death in any game. That's the magic of Pendragon. This time spent with your family, with your loved ones, with just getting to know your neighbors, the people around your estates, it's what gives the game stakes. It's what makes it worth playing. Do not skip it. Do not skip to the fights and just the big events. Spend some time with the families. Spend some time just getting to know and getting a feel for the world. All right. I can't recommend it enough. It's if anything you take away from this video and you want to run this game, don't shy away from those characterful moments. Lastly, we have the winter phase. Now, this is the more of an upkeep phase. This is where we go through any training events. This is where we make all the experience rolls, and we do any advancement of your characters. Your glory that you've accrued through the year is added onto your character, and you may get any prestige points or cross any glory thresholds. It's also where we roll for childbirth. If you've got a wife, it's more than likely that she may be with child. This is also the period when we can sort of go through your estates, see what's changed in your estates, what new buildings are you going to start in the next year, what's happened to your current buildings. Is anything being destroyed? Is there anything going wrong in your estate that you need to sort out? This is, they sort of call it the taxes period, but I think it's a lot of fun. It sort of grounds your character in the material aspects of their world. They have an estate, they have this much money, we've got these costs. It adds something a little bit relatable to the game that I think without it would be somewhat missing. Now, some people react to that and sort of think that the structure of the game is sort of constraining, that it sort of like locks you down. Oh, is this all we're gonna do? This is gonna get stale. We always do a feast in spring, and then we always go to war in summer, and then we do a couple little things around the estate and in autumn, and that's it, that's everything. Yes, actually, I kind of think it is. I think it's the best part of Pendragon, and it's what's gonna make your campaign last. Here's how I prep for Pendragon, and it's such an absolute breeze. I cannot tell you how nice it is to have this structure when compared to how other games are played. We're going to start with spring, right? I know there's going to be a feast, so what do I think? Well, it's probably going to be a small feast, a little 3-round feast, because Pendragon breaks, its feasts down into rounds and turns, just like it would with any other, important part of the game. It puts focus on it, mechanical focus, but it's not just like, how do I attack? How do I, ask for drinks? How do I talk to someone? No. Pendragon has this amazing set of event cards that you can draw. Every player, depending on their glory, can draw a couple of these event cards every feast, and it makes it really fun. You might, win the favor of a lady, or your lord might call on you to do something important, or you might just accidentally make a fool of yourself. It's all fun. It makes it a breezy, light-hearted start to a session and end the year. Then I sort of think about, what am I going to be doing in summer? All right. I know that, there's going to be a manticore in the forest to the north, but there's also, bandits on the road. Okay, well, I'll just stat those out, prepare them, and then just present it as rumors in the feast. So what I do is I seed those rumors into the feast, Round 2, you all sort of hear that there's been some bandits on the road up to the north, and it's made, the lords have been constrained. They haven't been able to get south to see us. Do you just want to go sort that out? Well, maybe you do, but you also heard that there's some strange beast lurking in the forest to the west. There's a lot of glory in that, but it's probably more dangerous. What do you want to do? Alternatively, it might be a war, at which point I'd sort of make the feast a lot more dour. I say, the Lord comes in, he slams his goblet down on the table. We are going to war in the summer, prepare your steeds. I think that's fun. It puts it sort of dour mood, and then people start to spend the feast going, oh, well, who's going to march in the vanguard? Who's going to take the flanks? And then they can sort of jockey for position, try and gain a little bit of favor for that. That's always fun. Adds a little bit of flavor to any war and battles coming up. And then after we've done any quests, war or battles, by the autumn, people are probably wounded, and in Pendragon it takes weeks to heal from injuries. So they actually don't mind a little bit of a slower, more casual, easy autumn. They need the break, honestly. They want to heal up. They want to just sit down, settle down, and take things a little bit slower. You cannot just stay in that high octane, battle and quest period for long periods. I think the characters won't last. They're not strong. They're not as robust as like D&D characters. They are tough, but when they get hit hard, they can go down fast. It's important to have this ebb and flow through the game. And that's why that table, this structure, works so well for Pendragon. Without it, I probably wouldn't think this game is so good. And that's why I do really, really recommend, at least for your first couple sessions, you play following this structure. Of course, once you've gotten them used to it, every now and then you throw a little feast in, autumn for a wedding, and then maybe you throw a battle in spring. That's where you start. You've been attacked. Oh my God, they're not going to know what's happening. They're going to be shocked. They're going to be stunned, and that's exactly what you want. You want to put them exactly in the feet of their characters. All I'm recommending, start with it. Learn the rule, know the rule before you break it. It's the funny thing about making this video and like thinking and talking about Pendragon so much, I actually want to run it again now. Well, maybe. No. Anyway, I've got a video. Can't be distracted. I'll switch this back around. I really love this picture. One thing I also want to say, Pendragon is actually very breezy to prep for. It usually only takes me an hour and a half for a standard year, one just, a little quest or a little battle in the, summer, a couple little things in spring, a couple little things in autumn. But when you want to go all out on a big battle, a big feast, when you want to put that prep in, Pendragon makes it matter. Everything that happens, everything you put your effort into in terms of prep, you will get returned to you. The more effort you put in, the more you'll get out. It's up to you how much you want to invest in it. That's the great thing about Pendragon. It's totally modular to the level of effort you want to put in. Now, personally, I try to spend maybe an hour, hour and a half on the average year of prep. When there's just, a little battle and, a couple little events in spring and autumn, I don't spend exorbitant amount of time prepping that sort of stuff, and I don't need to. The systems in these books make that smooth and fun and enjoyable for everyone at the table. One thing I also really want you to realize when I talk about how I prep and how much I, enjoy this system of, prepping things by spring, summer, autumn, it's because I love to get through a whole in-game year, every session that I play at Pendragon. Occasionally, when there's a particularly important quest or series of significant events, we'll break that. We'll have multiple sessions in a single, period of time. But generally speaking, I like to start, my 3-hour sessions of Pendragon in the spring, be done with that within half an hour, 40 minutes, go into summer. If it's an important battle, we'll spend a bit more time on it. But I love how fast we can get through the game. A whole year in just a couple rolls and some interesting scenes where we can learn a few things, get to know the characters a bit better is so much fun. I want you to take this as a little bit of a challenge. If you want to play Pendragon, if you've sat through this much of the video, I'm hoping you do want to play it. But by the time you get to session 10, let's try and hope that 10 years have passed in game. You might not get there, and that's okay. But if you can, I would really try to have that as a goal. It's going to be fun. You're going to feel like you can look back on this gulf of time that has passed. These characters that when you made them were young adults, basically, have turned into real men. They've grown, or men and women who have grown, who have seen things, who have changed over many years. It's going to be a lot of fun, and it's what feels so different about Pendragon. It's what sets it apart from any other game. So I highly recommend you maybe try and do that when you run it. Okay, I've spent a lot of time talking about the system, the game, how you prep for it, but I wanted to run through a couple things rapid fire. If you've noticed I've been looking down, it's because I have a computer in front of me with a little bit of script. I'm going to read directly off that for a moment because I want this to be fast. Okay, so combat is snappy and tense. It feels more like rocket tag as knights land glancing blows and scratches on each other. Then bam, you drop your opponent in a single hit. I love that ransoms are a normal and expected part of the game. If you are fighting a Saxon lord and you might not want to kill them because you might actually be able to ransom them for like tens or even hundreds of libra in value, and that's what you're going to spend on, buying new equipment, buying new horses, upgrading your estate, just getting fancy clothes for the next feast. It's so important. And it also means that when your character gets knocked down, you might be ransomed back to your lord. And then you've got to sort of make it up to them, I think, in the next battle, or you're completing a quest for them. You sort of want to get back in their good graces after they probably spent an exorbitant amount of money ransoming you from your enemies. I also love the way the estate system, which technically isn't out. I think it's in the third core book that will not be out yet. It's going to be the Book of Nobles when that comes out. Hopefully maybe that is even out by the time you're watching this. I love that it really just ties you into the land. One of the things that people don't maybe realize until they've played Pendragon for a while is that your character isn't really your character. Your estate is. Your estate and the upgrades you make to it, the personalized flourishes you add, is what's going to persist between characters. You start, in your 1 mana estate, during the reign of King Uther, and you add an armory here, and that's about all you could afford over the entire life of your character. Then the anarchy happens, and your next character has to just defend this estate. You don't even think about upgrades. You're just trying to make sure it doesn't get burned to the ground. And then by the time Arthur draws the sword, you've probably put some more upgrades on it. There's a solid palisade wall, and you're now a well and seasoned knight. This is maybe the son or the grandson of your first character. Ride with him to victory, and in those victories you're going to earn riches and rewards and loot, and you're going to come back and you're going to invest it back into your estate, and you're going to look at your estate in more like a piece of your character than even the actual character is. It's the real thing you're going to pass on, and the thing that's going to matter the most to you. I have these amazing estate sheets. Hopefully I'll be able to put one up on screen now. This is what I used in my last Pendragon campaign. My players loved it. They drew out their estates on these little hex maps. They flipped through to these upgrades and they poured over it. Which one are we going to get? Oh, I've got to get the permission of my lord to do this one, so I better go do this quest for him to win his favor. And then they loved it. They became so attached to their estates. I highly recommend you try and do that as well if you can. If I can link this in the doobly-doo in case you just want to use it, please feel free. Oh, wait. Oh, actually, I don't think I can do that. All the upgrades are just like almost verbatim stolen from the Book of the Estate. So actually, I'm going to recommend you go check out the Book of the Estate, and then I'll maybe put up something like that if I can. Or DM me. One of those two. I'm sure there's a way to contact me. I have no idea. Comment it. Comment. That's the thing. Like and comment. Something, something, something. Now, I have absolutely gushed about all the wonderful little subsystems and dice mechanics that make up Pendragon, but it's time that we addressed the dragon in the room. The stories of Arthur and the Knights of Camelot are timeless. My personal favourite adaptation was the BBC Merlin, though for others it's the Sword and the Stone or the Green Knight. These stories and characters are powerful, but surprisingly relatable still to us modern audiences. But I don't think that they, in and of themselves, are what make this system great. So when I see people overwhelmingly focus on Pendragon as just a vehicle to play the Great Pendragon campaign, I sort of think it's a mistake. Now, I love what the Great Pendragon campaign does, and you can bet your best sword that I'll be picking up the 3-volume set when it's going to be released for this edition of the game. But Pendragon is a wonderful system, not just for playing Arthurian knights, but for playing, historical games. The rules as we see them in these core books are perfectly perfected for playing any sort of game set in the early medieval period, roughly the period spanning from about 470 AD to 1000 AD. And with some small additions to the weapons and armor sections of the core book, this could easily be expanded out into the mid-1400s. What I want to know is why we don't also see some supplements, some books, some campaigns for, the Norman conquest of Britain, maybe the 100 Years' War. What about a short campaign following some of the famous Vikings that terrorized Europe? Now, here's the thing. Okay, I'm gonna be real honest with you. So I wrote this script a couple months ago. And in the time that it took me from writing that script to finding the time to film this, they came out with the Age of Vikings RPG, like from Chaosium. But I have issues with it. Okay, number one, it doesn't use the D20 system that I think works so good in Pendragon. It uses the basic role-playing's D100 system. It's fine, it's okay. I just personally think D100 dice rolls are sort of more for treasure tables, not really for character rolls. Warhammer Fantasy players, fight me, I am right. So I sort of still stand by some of these criticisms. I think that the Pendragon system should actually be their flagship historical engine. The basic role-playing game with the D100s and the hundreds and blah, blah, blah of skills, I think is a little bit clunky, a little bit messy. I think Pendragon is a bit cleaner and a bit more streamlined and a bit more fun because of that. I've actually got the RuneQuest books behind me, but they're leaning on some other books, so I'm not going to disturb them now. But when I look at that book, I look at that world, I'm like, I'm so interested, I want to run it. But D100, 50 different skills, bit off-putting. So anyway, back to Pendragon. I've already said that I think this should be their flagship historical game line, but why are we sticking to just medieval Europe? Why aren't we why isn't there a Pendragon system for playing campaigns set during the Odyssey, during the time of the ancient Greeks, who told stories of heroes driven by powerful emotions and insurmountable passions in a time when the laws of hospitality were as sacrosanct as they were in the times of knights and fair ladies? Where is the combined Troy and Odyssey campaign that treats Achilles or Odysseus as well as Pendragon treats Lancelot, Guinevere, and Arthur? Why isn't Pendragon the flagship historical role-playing game across the whole industry? Please, Chaosium, I am begging you. I think this would be amazing. And I know there have been rumors. There have been rumors that like an ancient Greek book or there's some ancient like Japan, like a feudal Japan book is like somewhat in the works, but I have no idea what's going on. All I see of those rumors is like stuff on like a Reddit, like the Reddit, and maybe a little bit on the Discord, but I have no idea what is going on with those. I think they're such a fantastic idea, and I'm going to snap them up in an instant the moment they release them. Okay, now here is where I think I'm going to lose some of you. If you are a Pendragon purist, if you're someone that's been playing Pendragon for years, I think this is maybe where you're going to, call me a horrible name in the comment. Why are we constraining ourselves to just history? Why isn't there a Game of Thrones supplement for Pendragon? Why can't I play a knight from a house before Robert's Rebellion, right through to the War of the Five Kings, pick a side and leave my mark on Westeros? Why aren't people running around, in their own campaign world? Why don't I see anyone posting about, their specific, takes of Arthuriana, their homebrewed, medieval Britons? I really, really believe there should be a lot more support for playing outside, the Great Pendragon campaign and specifically Arthurian Britain. These books are great, but they are so, so, so tailored to the Great Pendragon campaign in a way that actually, the previous editions aren't as much. The previous editions, at least 5.2 and what I've seen of those books, they talk about, Arthuriana and the myths of Guinevere and Lancelot, but they don't always exactly directly reference it. They just say, well, this is just how the estate system works. This is this estate from from the myths. This one, though, it's very, very specifically about Arthur in a way that I think is a bit of a mistake. What would that sort of stuff look like? Maybe some books on like how to create courtly plots and intrigues in the vein of Mordred and his plot to dethrone Arthur. Maybe a book on just like the pagan religion and like how to have more stories with fairies and other fantastical creatures of Britain. Let's have some more of that sort of stuff. Not necessarily tied to Arthuriana, but just tools, a toolbox of different adventures, monsters, and ideas that we can just drag and drop into our game as however we see fit. I think that would be an absolute godsend for the Pendragon line. I think it would make running the game, prepping the game, and making the game your own that much easier. I really hope they do something like this one day. Hell, look, I've honestly got half a mind to, write a, hack of Pendragon that actually sets it in a galactic kingdom, where the squabbling dukedoms and petty lords have, estates which span star systems. You could do all of that with the bones of this game, and I hope that we see something that ambitious, that fun come out of this game line. I think Chaosium can do it. They make amazing worlds. RuneQuest, 7th Sea, Pendragon, is all stunning. I think they could do it. I want to see them do something like this. Now, I have gushed about my love for the system and where I want it to go, but I think we might want to address some of the concerns your players might have. If you've gotten this far, you're probably interested, you probably want to play. But your players might have some, hang-ups about playing in this sort of period, playing these sort of characters. So let's address some of those things. Now, your players may come with, some concerns about playing in this sort of game. And I want to, put some of their concerns to rest, while also finding ways that they could engage with this sort of setting, this world, these sort of player characters, in ways that are authentic to the themes and culture that this game is trying to create, while also really dive into the 4 pillars that I think are core to creating an authentic feeling medieval Arthurian world, which hopefully you will use and make settings of and run games all of your own for many years to come. So first of all, I am not a medievalist. I don't have any classical history training. I just love this sort of stuff. I think it's fun. So from my perspective, the society of Europe between 500 to 1000 AD was deeply concerned with the proper place for different people, both in the strict 3-estate system and in the roles that men and women could play in society. Both of these are, in my opinion, incredibly important to the feel of an authentic medieval world. But I personally don't choose to focus so much on gender defining the roles for people, but for the role itself. Both of these, in my opinion, are incredibly important to creating a world which feels authentically medieval. But I personally don't choose to focus so much on gender defining the role for people, but instead focusing on the role itself. Now, this issue is actually explicitly called out in the text in this book, actually right next to this adorable little picture of a Lady Knight. It asks you to think about how common you would like Lady Knights to be in your game, with examples of how you could do this from individuals going against the grain like Joan of Arc, or maybe they are, present but few and far between, or maybe they are just as common as Sir Knights are. In my game, we chose for Lady Knights to be not so common, but through Adwin's exploits, by sort of being a trailblazer and setting this standard, more women are likely to enter, into the role of knights. We're going to see that change in the world due to player actions. It was not the most common thing beforehand, but now she has sort of changed the things and changed the standard in that world. What I also do, and I believe this is shamelessly stolen from Eric Vulgaris's Pendragon game, I don't know if it's in another book, but that's where I got it, is I really focus on the distinction between stewards and knights. In my game, typically the steward is the lady of the manor, though not always. Some men have more of a proclivity for the steward's role, managing the estate, and so often partner with a lady knight, and no one bats an eye. The knight still shouldn't stoop to certain tasks. The societal expectations of what is good and knightly behavior doesn't overlap with the duties of a steward very much, but the split is between the roles, not about the gender specifically. The next big thing is the church. Some people may not want to play Christian knights, which is fair, but I do think that having a monolithic church with a single god sort of hanging over the whole setting is an important part of a truly medieval world. Without the church, which makes up, the first of the three estates, I think the distinction between the second and third estates, the knights and the peasants, is a little bit too grim. Now, how do we address it? Well, first of all, you should ask yourself what sort of church you want to put into your world, so how you want to portray them, what you want them to be about. The 5th edition books did call this out, and to some extent, these new books do the same, but you can run the church as a good institution, a bastion of the community, or a corrupt and scheming faction vying for control, just like anyone else, or something in between. I squared this circle in one of my games by having the church be the Church of the Martyr Knight, a Joan of Arc figure who centuries ago fought a brutal war to drive out the Fae from the Isle, but sacrificed herself in the process. This church doesn't deny the existence of the fairy, but says that things were much worse back then. Life is better under the church, and to some degree, they are right. In my second campaign, the player knights found themselves overwhelmed by black knights sworn to serve the devil. Against those odds, they welcomed the help of the church, who supported them to eradicate the evil knights and to help them reclaim their estates. Alternatively, you don't actually have to have, the church play a super significant part of the game. If we think back to, BBC Merlin, we don't see a lot of, religious figures. We maybe see them around, funerals and weddings and those sort of things. And you can do the same thing in your game. Just have, oh yeah, well, the Lord is getting married. It's probably in, this particularly important church. At a certain knight's funeral, it's attended to by, their religious figure who is, probably has some of the trappings of, a Christian or Catholic church. It's up to you what you want to do with it. It doesn't even have to be necessarily the Catholic Church, but I do think that a large religious body that is sort of in this, equal-ish footing with the nobles, and which has a lot of overlap with them in terms of many of the people that went to serve in the clergy came from noble families. I think that having that is actually very important to the setting. Talk to your players, see what you're comfortable with. I think there's a way that you would be able to find, a happy middle ground if you're not entirely happy with, the church for whatever reason. Now, those are the two biggest pillars I think would turn someone off from Pendragon. The next two things I want to talk about are actually things that I think just enhance the feel of the world. The first is to be strict with the expectations of fealty and vassalage. If your knights want to travel too far or build fortifications, they are going to need to ask their lord for permission. This, to my knowledge, was how things really were, and how the lords controlled the knights under their service. It also means that earls can offer the chance to marry or expand their vassals' fief in exchange for completing a great deed or winning riches on the battlefield. Your game, your choice. These sorts of interactions, rooted in strict social norms and expectations, provide rich avenues for creating role-playing challenges that you don't really see in most games. And hey, look, you're going to have to play, all the commoners that your players are going to walk all over. Maybe be a bit of a dick as the Earl every now and then. Give them, an absolutely outrageous alternative, Just refuse their request outright. Because, when the, Earl's long lost heir, turns up unannounced and says that they actually should be the true heir and take over the estates, well, maybe the players will side with the usurper. That sounds like a fun campaign to me. Lastly, I think you should have Rome present in the hazy background of the setting. In our own history, when Rome retreated from the Isle, they took so much literacy, knowledge, trade, and resources with them. The Britons lost the knowledge of how to work stone, and in some cases thought aqueducts must have been built by giants. Make the old Roman forts the most defendable estates. Have the best roads be the old Roman roads slowly falling into disrepair. And make it clear, most knights don't know how to read. And if they do, it's a smattering of Latin only. And look, who knows? Maybe some of those aqueducts, some of those walls that are just a little bit too tall really were built by giants in the long past of your campaign. Well, look, if you've gotten this far and you haven't been persuaded, well, look, thank you for the view, but really you should give it a go. It's a lot of fun. But where should you start? Well, a little bit more of a tricky question. That is something you're going to have to decide, but I'll give you some pointers and some ideas. Well, as far as I can tell, the starter set is a great introductory option. It comes with a very fun little short adventure, lots of pre-gens, dice, all the fun stuff. And it's a good, cheap way to get into the game, to get a feel for it. Otherwise, I would recommend getting these two beautiful, amazing books. If by the time that you're watching this, the third one of these is out, I would probably get that as well. The one issue with these books, there's not that many NPC stat blocks in this one. It's mostly in the Game Masters section. So you probably want to pick this one up too if you're going to run the game. Look, I love these books and think they're absolutely gorgeous. The people at Chaos Games would be very proud of what they've made, but they can be a little bit pricey. They can run you about $50 US each at the moment, but the PDFs are about half that and are just as useful. If you are picking this up and you maybe don't know where to start with actually like writing a campaign, you might want to start with one of these pre-made adventures that they've been putting out recently. They look really good. Their art looks stunning, and judging if the quality of these books is anything to go by, I'm sure they are brilliant. I haven't played any of them, so I can't recommend anything, but here, pick whichever one looks the best to you. I'm sure you'll have fun either way. Lastly, as well, like I said, this edition will be compatible with everything else that's come before it. So really, you might also want to look at some of the older editions. 5.2 is where I started, and I love that edition of the game still. You also might want to just pick up some of the old, source books, the Book of the Estate, the Book of Battles. Maybe you want to pick up one of the old adventures and stuff. I heard that some of the old editions even have rules for magic and like playing fairy characters. So go a little bit wild, have a look around, see what piques your fantasy and what sort of campaign you want to run. There's really no rules here. You've got about, 50 years of 50, maybe 40 years of content and books and source books for this game that you could go through. I mean, world's your oyster. Look, honestly, wherever you start, I think you're going to have a lot of fun. Look, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope I have sold you on Pendragon. I hope you want to give it a go. Look, if you really aren't interested in Pendragon, but like the idea of knights and myths, you definitely might want to pick up Mythic Bastionland. I haven't gotten to play this yet, but it is on my bucket list. If you are watching me and haven't watched Quinn's Quest, definitely go check out that review for a brilliant review of this game. But have a look around. I think just the setting alone is so much fun. And in my experience, these books do it the best. But yes, otherwise, take care. I think I'm also going to release another video at this time where I'm just going to be more talking to the camera without a script and just talking about, some criticisms I do have about the game. I love this game. If I was going to give it a grade, it would be an A+ easily. I'm going to be talking about, the few little things that I think would get it to, that S+, that ultimate, like, perfect game for me. But anyway, please take care and have a nice rest of your day.